Hello, everyone. I'll just give a few seconds for people to finish joining. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Neurodiversity Celebration Week 2025. My name is Andrea. I'm one of the psychologists at Lexic. This is an organisation specialising in supporting neuro-inclusive workplaces, and we are also the official partners of Neurodiversity Celebration Week. Firstly, a huge thank you to everyone. We've now passed 90,000 registrations across all of our events this year, which is an incredible achievement. There are over 100 people speaking this week, and you can see their images on the right-hand side of the screen. So to our panel chairs, our panelists, to Lexic, to you, and to anyone who's helping amplify the message of the campaign or sharing our events, thank you so, so much. I'm going to be spending a few minutes now going through some housekeeping, a bit about the campaign, and then I'm going to hand over to our panel chair for this event to get started with some introductions and the exciting discussion we've got planned. So a bit of housekeeping. Please note that we are live on Zoom. We cannot hear or see you, so please do whatever you need to do and make yourself comfortable in the background. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be sent out to you via email following the event. Don't worry, as our audience, you are not being recorded at all. Closed captions are also turned on for those people who would like them. The chat and Q&A feature is also turned on, so please say hello and engage in the conversation. If you've got questions, please try and keep them to the Q&A function. However, I will say the chat and the Q&A is being moderated by the team at Lexic, so please be kind and also please be respectful. The chat can get really, really busy with lots of notifications popping up, which some people can find distracting. You can mute your chat notifications if you would like by following a few steps, which our event moderators will now outline in the chat for you. We will be sending out an email with some useful links, including the recording link and details of our panelists to everyone who has registered to the event. This will happen about 2 hours after the event. And we'll also be sending you a link to this session's recording and some useful resources via email as well. Here is the link to the Neurodiversity Celebration website and just some reminders about getting involved and registering for the various events we've got this week. So, a little bit about Lexic. We are the official partners of Neurodiversity Celebration Week. Lexic are the leaders in empowering neurodiversity in the workplace, and they're also the organisers behind Neurodiversity Celebration Week. As a specialist psychological consultancy, we support organisations around the world to become more neuro-inclusive. We support individuals by offering services such as diagnostics, workplace needs assessments, and coaching. We also support teams with line manager training, e-learning, webinars, and workshops. And we also deliver organisational wide change programs. So we're looking at things such as helping individuals understand their processes a bit more. And we also offer a neurodiversity accreditation. Please remember to visit the Lexic website for more information. You can find that here. So, with all of that covered, I'm delighted to hand over to our panel chair. Please welcome Amanda Kirby.
Morning, everybody, and afternoon, evening. I've just seen, I was like, wow, the chat is going wild, and we've got nearly 1,500 people on the call, and they're coming from Tanzania, Germany, Belgium, Australia, Singapore, Rome. Wow, and it's only Monday. So this is an amazing week. We got Dubai, just put in wherever you're coming from, South Africa. It's like, oh, this is incredible. So this is the first panel of the week, and I'm so delighted to have my guests with me today. And we've got 3 guests here in the room at the moment: Sonny Jane Wise, Will de Laszlo, and Ben Branson. And we're going to have a great conversation. Neurodiversity Celebration Week is a celebration, and I want us to talk about the things that are driving us to move forward and positively changing the world. But also, we can't not say about current barriers that might be stopping us from doing so. So I'm going to kick off. I'm Professor Amanda Kirby. I'm the CEO of Do It Solutions. I'm a neurodivergent. I've got a minestrone of neurodiversity in my family. So children, grandchildren, cousins, aunts, uncles. And the more we go, the more we realise, well, we just didn't have labels and things 20, 30 years ago. My passion in this field really has driven my work over the last 30 to 40 years. So I'm delighted to be at the chair today for the first panel. So I'm going to shut up for a minute and I'm going to start to introduce the people in my panel who've got stories to tell and a discussion to have. And really, I can see the chat's going wild. Put your questions and things, and we'll have time, hopefully, to take some questions and have sound from everybody across the globe this morning. Let me start off with Sonny Jane Wise, who, thank you, because she's calling in from Australia. Okay, so I'm thinking Monday morning, she's thinking Monday evening, but I'm delighted you're here today. And Sonny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Sonny Jane. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a nationally and internationally recognized neurodivergent, disabled, and trans advocate, public speaker, and author. So I wrote the Neurodivergent Friendly Workbook of DBT Skills, which was the first neurodiversity affirming DBT workbook in the entire world. And I also wrote We're All Neurodiverse, which is basically an introductory guide to all things neurodiversity, from the neurodiversity paradigm to neuronormativity. So I've been delivering talks and trainings to government departments, organizations, businesses, therapists, and allied health professionals for over 5 years now. And I've been working on various committees and co-chairing committees to help support autistic people in Australia. I guess what's most important is that I'm an autistic ADHDer, but I'm also someone with learning disabilities, BPD, NPD, complex trauma, which explains the BPD and NPD, bipolar, ARFID, OCD, and I also hear voices. And that's actually why I'm really passionate about neurodiversity, because it recognizes the diversity of how my mind functions and how other people's minds functions, and recognizes my unique differences without labeling them as an illness or disorder. So, ranging from communication differences to eating differences to sensory differences to altered states like mania, psychosis, and dissociation. And that's why I talk a lot about neurodiversity and shifting our lens in how we see differences in altered states. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Sonny Jane. Now, one thing you might want to put in chat what some of those acronyms stand for, okay? Because what I want is to make sure that people understand. We heard both BPD and OCD. So if you can put those in the chat, just what some of those acronyms stand for, that would be great for everybody. Or we can do it afterwards, okay? Just so everybody understands.
I can do that right now.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to move on. Thank you for that. Wow. And thank you for coming on board today. Will, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me on Neurodiversity Celebration Week. It's a first for me, and I'm super excited. My name is Will Delaslo. I'm the founder of a firm that invests in small companies called Agathos, that helps them grow and strengthen them, which is super exciting. I had learning disabilities as a kid, growing up on the spectrum of severe. This is an area that's I'm completely passionate about, because all minds do matter, and that creative thinking is so important for us all. I've had my fair share of failures, of business failures, but Agathos is one of the most exciting companies that I've been involved in. Yeah, that's a snapshot of me.
Thank you. And last but not least, Ben, can I introduce yourself to everybody?
Amanda, just to let you know, Cara is actually on the call.
Oh, she's on the call.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, so
Brilliant.
We are a full
great. Cara,
panel.
I'll come to you next. So thank you, Ben. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Ben.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Branson. I'm the founder of a charity called The Hidden 20%, which we set up probably about 14 months ago. Previous to 2022, I had absolutely never heard the word neurodiversity before. I had very, very limited understanding and a lot of actual ignorance around autism, ADHD. I'd never heard the word dyscalculia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia, knew very little about things like Tourette's and any of the other TBIs and seemingly less understood neurotypes. And so being diagnosed autistic in 2022 was a big moment, I guess, and a very liberating, made a lot of sense. I was definitely the last to know, and set off, I guess, a chain of events of me trying to understand what was going on in the world and why there is this lack of awareness, and why, whether it's suicide rates, unemployment, homelessness, criminal justice system, mental health, divorce, etc., why we have so many challenges, and yet the lack of awareness is so high around them. And so fast forward, I wanted to do something about that, and that was as much about adults as about children and future generations, to try and break this cycle of the silence, I guess, and the sort of stigma and shame associated with thinking differently and behaving differently in a society that perhaps wasn't built necessarily for people like us. And we've had an amazing first year. We decided to use media as a way to kind of try and spread awareness and education, and sort of stand on the shoulders of incredible social change campaigns that, you know, have done so much brilliance over the last sort of 50 years. And whether that's Pride or Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement or climate change or even Jamie's school dinners, they've all successfully used media and spokespeople representation to effect awareness and change on a really, really big scale. And so we're sort of proud to be part of that with our podcast and with various other activities coming up.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ben. And you invited me on your podcast, and we had just a great conversation. You make me feel like I'm only in the room and having a chat to a friend, which I think you are my friend, I think. And I think that's wonderful, actually, to be able to have those conversations, to have them freely. And that's what I want us to do today. Cara, I want to come to you. I said Ben last but not least, but Cara, not last but not least. Good morning to you, and thanks very much for coming along to this panel. I wonder if you could just introduce yourself to everybody on the call.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for probably giving you a massive fright. That's Neurodiversity Action.
Come down.
The whole team has been so good in organising this and sending like all of the information in all of the emails, but obviously somehow I still managed to get confused. So there's Neurodiversity in action for you.
Yeah.
But my name is Cara McMurtry. I'm a former Olympic rower. I was on the Great Britain rowing team for 10 years. Had a pretty up and down time in sport, and that's very much what led me to found Neurodiverse Sport, which is a not-for-profit really trying to change the landscape of sport so that neurodiverse considerations aren't a sideline, that they are considered and kind of woven throughout all sport at all levels. So from grassroots to elite, but also not just in intellectual impairment sport, not just in parasport, but mainstream sport as well, because we know that the majority of neurodivergent people will be participating in mainstream sport. A bit more about me, I was not diagnosed until quite late in my career, and prior to that I was misdiagnosed as having bipolar disorder and medicated for that for 5 years, which was very tough because the medication that I was on in particular was kind of acted as a bit of a sedative, so trying to compete on the international stage at that time was very, very difficult. But more than anything, I think I really struggled with just not feeling particularly understood or supported, because I didn't kind of think, learn and behave in a way that was expected of me. And I think in sport, we really love to categorize people, and we really like to lean on tradition, and we expect sort of very narrow kind of margins of behaviour from people. And I guess we're here to try and broaden those parameters so that more people can access sport and excel. When I was like listening to the other speakers, I was like, oh God, I feel like a bit of an imposter here because we just focus on sport. But yeah.
Don't. I think that's the interesting thing. We all feel like we're imposters here. I think that you're on a panel of imposters, okay?
Definitely,
So
yeah.
I think that's the important thing, that one of the things I think, coming across everybody's introduction, I really didn't realize I was neurodivergent till much later in a way. Even though I'd worked in this field for 40 years, I was the last, like Ben said, last to know, in a sense, when everybody goes, yeah, and I think that reality of who you are as a person has changed for all of us, our framing of who we are and who we were. And I think as adults, wherever we're working and living, and we've got people from across the globe, I mean, literally across the globe this morning, who've joined us at all times of day and night, that identification of who you are can change over your lifespan as well, can't it? Who you were as a child. But it does have an impact on how people view you. Carrie, you were just saying how your diagnosis changed. And I think that's something that's quite challenging for lots of people. Can I just go, I'm going to just go across the panel for a minute, and then I think we're just going to go into free discussion after that. Sonny, what have you seen as the sort of barriers, the current barriers and challenges, and why does this matter so much to you? So I'm going to give you 2 bits of those questions, and then I think after that I'm going to just, because I've got so many questions I want to ask you guys, so but I'm going to just ask that for a second. So 2 bits. Why does this matter, and what do you think are the barriers at the moment?
I think in order to explain why neurodiversity matters so much to me, and why I think it matters in general, why it matters in regards to people's well-being and future, I think to explain that, I need to explain a bit about my story. So I was diagnosed with autism when I was a young child in the 90s. So we're talking about 6-7 years old. And back then in the late 90s, we didn't actually have an understanding of autism and our differences that we do now. We didn't have an understanding of sensory differences or sensory needs. We didn't even understand stimming. We didn't understand special interests, or, our differences in empathy or our monotropic attention. We definitely didn't understand meltdowns. So when I was diagnosed, and when I was growing up, basically I grew up believing I was broken. I grew up believing I had a disease, I had an illness, I needed to be fixed and cured, that there was something wrong with me, that I was lacking so much. So I wasn't treated with understanding. I definitely wasn't given support. I wasn't given accommodations or adjustments. I wasn't even given the tools or knowledge to understand my needs, because no one else around me understood my needs. So instead, I was ridiculed, I was bullied by my peers, teachers, family. I was punished by the people around me. I was punished by my teachers, punished by my parents, punished for being autistic. And I was also chemically restrained with antipsychotics from a very, very young age. So I think for about 15, 16 years, I was on antipsychotics in order to control my meltdowns, control my outbursts and dysregulation. And so instead of figuring out the cause of my meltdowns, instead of supporting my need for certainty, my anxiety around changes, my difficulty with routines or unfamiliarity, my communication difficulties, my alexithymia, my sensory needs, which obviously all resulted in frequent meltdowns, I was put on antipsychotics in order to calm the farm, so to speak. So all of this messaging really basically impacted my self-esteem. It impacted how I saw myself. It impacted how I felt about myself, how I talked about myself. And up until my late 20s, when I was introduced to neurodiversity, I knew nothing but shame and self-hate and embarrassment over myself and my differences. Basically, you know, this is quite vulnerable, but I was taught to hate myself so much that when I was 10 years old, I decided to overdose on my medication because I thought if I did, I would get better quicker. And that's what everyone wanted around me. They wanted me to get better. And then in my 20s, I was diagnosed with multiple personality disorders as well as bipolar. And again, I was exposed to the same narrative that there was something wrong with me. I have an illness. My personality is disordered. I need to be fixed and cured.
Yes.
So that is all I've ever known till I learned about neurodiversity. And when I learned about neurodiversity, you know, that's when I, you know, started discovering my needs, realizing that I wasn't broken, realizing that I was deserving of being alive, that I was deserving of being respected and accepted, that I was deserving of support, that I was deserving of having access to support. And so that's why neurodiversity matters to me. And I think it also matters to everyone else because it changes our narrative. It changes the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that we hear about ourselves from other people. It changes how you understand your differences, how you understand your needs, and it shows your worth as a human. And, you know, I think, yeah, that's why neurodiversity is really important because I think it, you know, changes the stories we tell about ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, that's really, I mean, you know, and there's people saying in the chat, because the chat is like, blah, 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 you know, and sort of saying people having similar stories. And I think you're right about the impact of seeing yourself as a young child as somebody who needs to be fixed and we need to alter and make you fit into society. You know, I can remember being a young, because girls weren't neurodivergent, or we didn't even use that language at all, you know, and I just remember wanting to fit in was so important to me, to just fit into the way the other girls, they had hobbies that I wasn't interested in. I had a quirky hobby that people laughed at, right? And it was just like that. I remember that discomfort of feeling shame, but I loved what I brought like model-y things that I'd made that I was really pleased about. And I remember the other girls laughing at me, you know, and going away and thinking, well, I liked that, but I can't do that anymore and hiding. So I think you're absolutely right. So thank you for sharing that, because I think it's a difficult story. Will, do you want to tell a little bit about why why it's important for you? Because I think self-esteem and confidence is going to be a theme going through this, isn't there? Of our early feelings of difference, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think, wow, so thank you so much for sharing that. It was very humbling. And yeah, I think I can really resonate with the sense of, as a young child, I was diagnosed at a very young age. My father was very dyslexic, but dubbed as being stupid or not good enough. And I think in the 1980s, that was still very prevalent. There wasn't the correct support within the education system. I had a very supportive mother who was constantly taking me to extra support, extra learning classes, and extra this, extra that. And so therefore you had this kind of stigma attached to that, of feeling that something's wrong with you, that you need to be fixed. And I think it's taken me a long time to really come to terms with kind of severe dyslexia and ADHD, because you spend a lot of time masking it, because especially as a young child or a young adult in the workplace, you just want to fit in. You almost don't want to be found out, and that kind of imposter syndrome that comes is still relevant and with me today. And I think why neurodiversity matters, and the acceptance of and the understanding of, is because I think so much talent is screened out of the system at very early ages, because there's like this linear way of processing or assessing individuals. And a couple of examples for me were joining the service. It was a very important part of our family culture, and wanting to join the army. Initially, I failed to get in to the army. And because there was a screening test that filtered out pretty much spot on for filtering out anybody with neurodiverse traits. And I don't know whether I can say this now because I'm 45 and that's a long time ago, but I actually cheated to get into the army by stealing the test papers, which was this long manual. I kind of memorized it because I was very desperate to do it. And I managed to get myself another assessment, and then I got in. And the only way of really saying I only came clean on leaving this academy kind of within the army, because I was one of the 3 Blade Runners, the best 3 cadets within the year, which I was immensely proud of. But then I managed to say, well, look, but yeah, I wouldn't have got in had I not cheated. And part of the army's kind of like mantra was, honor and not not lying. But there's this like really this huge disconnect between that. Yeah, so it matters to me, because I think we need to have a very clear change of the way that, especially companies and organizations, there's a hiring process that can be shifted and is shifting, which is really exciting. And later on in my kind of career, I again tried to get in to do an MBA, which was my pinnacle of fear, I guess, to a degree, of exams, having only got a C and a D at A level. And I was rejected first time through because of the normal assessment process. And then an amazing individual called Stefan Chambers let me in on a wild card, literally on a wild card, based on some of my credentials, things that I'd achieved. And I ended up with a distinction and top 10% of the class, but I only with the correct support of kind of the tutors and neurodiversity supports. And so it for me, that was just like 2 demonstrations, examples in my own life of, if we screen people out, then they have no chance of giving something a go. So that's why I'm absolutely passionate about this space and changing the landscape, which we all think. So
Thanks, Will. I mean, I think it's interesting, one of the things that I think the problem we've got, and if you think about the language we've already heard, it's disorder, deficit, lack of, and we're still in a space whereby, in order to get a diagnosis, maybe we'll go into this a bit more in a minute, but in order to get a diagnosis or not, you have to be bad enough. You have to show you're bad enough.
Disability, yeah.
It's a deficit model.
Yeah.
So it's not exclaiming and proclaiming the things that we can do. You have to show. And as a parent, I remember when I ran a clinical centre for a long time, and I'd say to parents, I'm really sad you have to tell me all the things your child can't do. Because as a parent, you don't want to do that. You don't want to come along and big up the things your child can't do, because it's a horrible thing, because you want to big up all the things your child can do and celebrate that. So I think the language we've still got is very much deficits and disorder. Will, did you want to just come in there?
Only to add to that is
Ben.
one of the most amazing tutors that gave me confidence was, and she reframed, because I was labelled as disabled, and she's like, "You're not disabled, you're just differently abled." And that was a really interesting, for me personally, that was a really interesting way of changing something. It's like, you're just differently abled. You have strengths in these areas, and you're not very good at these areas, and that really helped me. Anyway, so I just thought I'd share that.
Well, thank you. And I think we'll come back to words and language and how we represent ourselves. It's really personal, isn't it? And I think in the chat, people are going, blah, 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 all sorts of different ways, because what is right for you to describe yourself is right for you to describe yourself. And we should have the power and the control to be able to do so and not be judged on that basis. I think one person being important in your life, I think that's a really important thing. Often people go, I met somebody who believed in me and could see the things I could do, and they changed my narrative. And Ben, let me come to you. What about yourself and your experiences as well?
Yeah, so I have 3 daughters.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And yeah, I guess a big driving force for me personally, and why I wanted to set the charity up and why I'm, I guess, so passionate about this space is, very logically and simply, I look at the stats of bullying rates, exclusion rates, the SEND crisis, even studies that have been done on how ashamed dyslexic children feel when they are told that they are dyslexic, which is like 85%, by the way. And you got 94%, this is in the UK, 94% of autistic children being bullied. And I am in that stat, right?
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
And so I will do anything for my children that means that they don't have to grow up, with the same with the same societal norms, basically, where these things happen. And interestingly, with River, our 5-year-old, she knows she's autistic, and she knows far more about the positives of her being autistic than the negatives. She understands that there are challenges, but when I sit in the playroom with my kids the other night, and my wife is reading a book to our 2.5-year-old, and River's facing me, she can't even see the book. She's talking to me and she just goes, "Mummy, he's just skipped a page on that book."
I love that.
And she's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And to be able to explain to her that that's because that's how her brain works,
Which is amazing and wonderful.
which is wonderful to support, so that, and I've got, one example of my daughter in this case, of her not being presented with a mountain and her not being presented with all the negatives and all the problems first. It's got to be this balance of truth. I think neurodiversity is absolutely critical to the future of our time on this planet.
Yeah.
And I'm a great nature lover, and I recognize the absolute kind of critical importance of biodiversity and of having diverse ecosystems and all the species that we need in order to make this planet work. And for so long, we've missed the fact that we need the same for us.
An average society we've tried to conform to, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. We
tried.
tried to turn everything into being the same and into being a factory. And when I understood that all the people I've looked up to, whether that's business heroes or artists, authors, scientists, engineers, all the people that have made significant contributions to the way in which we live our lives, a lot of them thought differently. And a lot of those alive, who are still alive, do think differently. And I think we've missed having role models and missed that representation that shows the younger generations that, hey, you can be different and it's okay. Actually, you can find opportunities and environments in which you thrive. And having sat down with 60 amazing guests on our podcast over the last 12 months, that message and that proof that people have had difficult times and found things difficult, but they have managed to find the environments in which they thrive. And we need more of those environments. And the way we have more of those environments is we have more understanding, so that we can create and be part of making those environments exist. So yeah, I've absolutely drank the Kool-Aid, right? I am incredibly evangelical about thinking differently.
I know, it's wonderful. I think you are, because I think it's wonderful, because I think it's that, all of us are here because we're passionate about. Sonia, I know your hand's up, but I'm going to go to Cara first, if that's okay. And I think that's important, that we're here because it's important. And it's really, we didn't have a celebration week a few years ago. This is an amazing opportunity to hear stories that we're hearing that are true, that give people a narrative which is different from the one that I certainly knew 20, 30, 40 years. If it wasn't for my children and grandchildren, I'm passionate because of the future, but I also feel very fortunate that I'm able to go and find answers, that got a computer and I can come online and have a conversation with you. I think there are a lot of people around who don't have any of those opportunities, and are at the edges of society. I'm going to come back. Let's open the discussion in a minute, but I want to, Cara, because you've looked at neurodiversity in sport, and particularly, and you're not an imposter, and you're here for a really good reason, okay? And I just think about what what you think is important and why that is. You tell us a little bit about your story, but a bit more about why that's important to you now.
Yeah, I guess. Firstly, I'm in massive danger of saying nothing, because I don't know if anyone else gets this, but hearing Sunny and Will and Ben speak, like there were so many things pinging off in my head that I've got about 3,000 thoughts queued up, and then the funnel is like stuck, so like nothing's going to come out. So I'm going to really try and sort of like center myself and get the most important things out. Firstly, I have a daughter named River as well, so bring up that name. I think something that, and I've really struggled with how I'm going to put this into words, but if I just tell everyone a little bit about the landscape as it is at the moment in sport, and I'm sure this is mirrored in other industries as well, but we know that, well, anecdotal evidence, and this is from various Olympic teams, suggests that 40 to 70% of, your international Olympic teams are neurodivergent. So 40 to 70% of athletes on those teams will be neurodivergent. And yet we still have phrases like, we've got one of those autistics on our team being thrown around. And I just do not understand it. And it's a bit like what Ben was saying, like, and Will and Sunny as well, but there's magic in everyone. Like everyone has strengths. Like even if they are made to feel like they don't, everybody has strengths. And it's about supporting needs and supporting challenges in order for people to thrive, to feel like they are safe and secure and that they can access those strengths. But until we change that narrative around that kind of deficits focus, until we stop throwing these kind of like phrases around that, they don't have all their marbles, or they need to be more this, or they're too much of this, people are not going to feel safe to be their authentic selves. They're not going to be able to ask for help. Like ideally we would just talk about neurodiversity in the different ways that we think and process and learn, just like we talk about in sport, for instance, just like we talk about the physical aspects of our performance and nutrition and sleep and things like that, but we don't. And I think that events like this are obviously, they're going a massive way towards changing the narrative, but I think for me that's what really needs to happen. And then I think we need to take it from two sides. We need to start at the kind of more inclusion end, but also if we make that change at perhaps the more performance side of things, then we will start to get role models, and again that will have a massive impact. Imagine if you saw your favorite footballer and they were like, yeah, I'm autistic, I love to do the same thing every day like every single athlete does, and I struggle with this, but my coach helps me in this way. And I think that would have an amazing impact on people's confidence and that ability to feel like you might be able to just push yourself that little bit further in everyday life.
So I think one of the things, and I'm watching the chat at this, I'm trying to dual task here, listening and engaging with what you're saying as well, which is so important around how do we make this a conversation we can have at any time, and make it not something that is a big thing to have as well. I mean, one of the things I'm seeing lots of people going, what do we need to do to change the landscape? What do we need to do to make change that we can have these conversations? Because I often have that sort of battleground with language. Somebody's putting in the chat at the moment, is it neurodiversity or neurodivergent? What should we do? And if we get it wrong, we get it right. And it evokes huge emotions in people about what we say and how we describe ourselves. What do Cara, your point of how do we have those conversations? How do we make people feel safe? And Ben, you having with your daughter that, celebrating those things and seeing the sparks in people. What do you think stopping that happen at the moment? I mean, we're having this week, but I'm always really important that it's not a week, it's a life, right? It isn't just today. It isn't just this week. How do we have lasting impact to change some of that? Because we're in a hotspot, I think, globally, but, even in the UK, we've got waiting lists for diagnoses for a certain condition. Somebody put in chat that, no, we're not talking about dyscalculia, we're not talking about developmental, and we can do that. We can talk about, we're not talking about dyspraxia or DCD, we're not talking about, we're talking about people, aren't we, right? How do we have a lasting impact that we can get people into work, we can help support the children? So Cara and then Sonny.
Unmute myself. Oh, the thought's gone out of my head. This is neurodiversity.
That's fine.
There was me
Come
trying
back.
to undo my hand and there was something in the way. And then Sunny, go first and then I'll come back.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, I'll come back to you. So Sonny.
Well, honestly, I think there needs to be more discussion and unpacking and challenging around neuronormativity, the ideology that there is a right or superior way to function.
Yeah.
You know, it is reinforced in our workplaces, our schools, our relationships, the mental health field, general society, that a set of expectations and values and ideals and standards of how people should function, how people should pay attention, how people should feel, how people should exist and experience the world. And I don't think we can, you know, make room for those differences as long as people hold those attitudes and expectations on how we should function. Until, you know, we can really reframe those expectations and, you know, let go of our, you know, expectations around how people should function and exist. We can't really make room for the diversity in how we function and exist. So like, it's the same with, you know, with queer people and trans people, that ideology that there is, you know, two genders or only right sexuality. It isn't until we challenge those ideas that we can actually accept that there are multiple genders and multiple sexualities. And that's the same thing with neurodiversity. Until we let go of the idea that there is a right way to function, we can't really make room for all the different ways that we function.
But it's interesting, Sonny, because, you know, and I agree, we have to have a broader narrative of how people are, right, in society than we've had before, which we run in a sort of industrial era of narrowing the vision, you know. But it's an interesting one that we go back to defining ourselves by categories, though. So we've got this sort of, you know, I am dyslexic, or I have autism, or I have, you know, do you know what I mean? So we go, this is me in entirety. But one of the things Ben picked up on is that not everybody is having the same life either, you know. Will, and then Cara, if you want to come back in, put your hand back up when you're ready. Okay, all right, okay. Will, then Ben, then Cara, whichever way round, everybody.
Cara's completely spot on. I mean, for me, I think it's really interesting. I reflect on my own journey. There's for me personally, so much shame associated with being different as a young kid, as a young adult. And I think for me, it's just reframing and being more open. And like this week is amazing. And I feel so privileged to be part of it. But it's also took me a lot to get my head around becoming part of this week and this celebration. Kind of like, I would have never dreamt of doing this 10 years ago because of that stigma that I'd been kind of reinforced time and time again, that you weren't good enough, you were different, and also you wanted to hide those differences. So the key one for me is talking more, being more open, sharing the positive stories that are out there that's so prolific through society, the individuals that help change and shape our world, often from different background, neurally diverse backgrounds, especially in the sports field of sport. And I think Cara's point around, wouldn't it be amazing if footballers said, yeah, I suffer from autism, or I have ADHD, and this is how I operate. Yeah, that's, again, but being more open about it and talking more about it. I can say loads of it, but I'm going to stop there because there's more important people to talk about than me.
No, we need probably around 3 hours because there's like the questions are coming in. I mean, when somebody's talking about their child being recently diagnosed, and whether, you know, Ben, you talked about your child knowing they were on the autism spectrum, right? And having that conversation. And we've had that, you know, with children. Often parents said to me, shall I say, you know, and I think, oh, they've come hundreds of miles to come to have a chat. Where did they think they were going to McDonald's for the morning, you know? So that conversation, be able to have a conversation with your kids and air this, so it's not something hidden and shameful, is massive, isn't it, really, in a way? It really is. That's a massive change. Ben, then Cara, I haven't forgotten you. So hold on in there.
Yeah, I think the real, I know, you know, having just skimmed through some of the comments, and it's kind of like, we need, you know, there's lots of change that needs to happen, right?
Yeah.
Lots of things need to change. And given we as a community are prone to, you know, wonderful things like senses of moral justice and impatience and impulsivity and yeah, wanting that change to happen quickly. I think my only kind of relatable experience of this was, 10 years ago, if you weren't drinking alcohol, you could probably only get a bottle of Beck's Blue or some Schlur grape juice, right? There were
I remember
no
Schlur.
options if you did not want to drink alcohol. And all of that social stigma, etc., was absolutely there if you were said to somebody that you weren't drinking alcohol. We had a culture that glamorized getting drunk and celebrities falling out of nightclubs at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was very weird if you did not drink alcohol. And I launched a non-alcoholic product back in 2015, and have been through that journey of getting towards mainstream normalization of the fact that it doesn't really matter about the alcohol content of your drink. It matters that you are happy with your drink and that you are. But the mirror that we are holding up to people with neurodiversity is incredibly uncomfortable for people. Everybody on this call, we can all fly the flag and we're all there, but that we are way ahead of where mainstream society is. Way ahead. You only have to read the news headlines in a week to understand when people are saying dyslexia doesn't exist, ADHD is a scam, etc., that we've still got a long way to go, and that's okay. Like, that's okay.
It is, but it's a long way to go. I mean, I started campaigning my son's nearly 40, right, which is depressing in itself. But I mean, it's a long campaign, this, it really is. And you're right, Ben, is that we are in this room, all nearly 2,000 of us have turned up today to have a conversation. And I want to talk to all of you, because we're here, right? But there are an awful lot of people who are not in the room, who are just excluded completely from society. I work in the justice setting, and there are so many people there. It's about poverty, exclusion. It's about not having their needs recognised. And so I think we've got to really ensure that we do keep remembering the people who are not here, because we're here and actually having the conversation, which makes us incredibly fortunate, even if we think we shouldn't be here. Cara, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just to add to everything that everyone said, like, I have a very practical brain, and I guess I work back from, I don't know, maybe the barriers or the problems, but I think most people are fairly empathetic, and when you explain neurodiversity and the human element and the positives of being neuroinclusive, most people will, if they're in a stress-free state and they've got time on their hands and they're feeling good, will say, yeah, that's the right thing to do, I want to be neuroinclusive. But the reality is that no one lives their life like that. Like, work is stressful, everyone has some sort of issue in their life, whether it's money, whether it's family, whether it's emotions, all these things. And so I think the only way to make genuine change on a really wide scale is to influence systems. So it's governance, it's policy, it's the way that we do things, so that neurodivergent people are not seen as burdens. Because I think we create systems that work for the neurotypical brain, and then it means kind of, I see it like neurodivergent people go through those systems like lemmings. They just keep bumping into things and then walking in a different direction. And then other people get exacerbated at them because other people have this, limited capacity as well. I say other people, neurotypical people maybe don't struggle as much in those systems. But I think it's that frustration that then causes people to say, oh, it's another one of those autistic people. Oh, I've got
them and us.
Them and us, and I need to help you, but I'm already doing my job. Well, if we take a step back and we create systems that work for everyone, and everyone can do this kind of the same thing but in a different way, we won't get so infuriated at each other, if that makes sense. I don't know.
It does. It really makes sense. I think it's such an important point about is The problem being when people have to think about this person, what do I do for this person? And this person, what do I do for this person? They become overwhelmed by, I don't know. And it's interesting, we do have, in the UK, I know we're coming from across the globe, in the UK, we've got the Equality Act 2010. You know, it's 15 years old. Is it being implemented fully to make sure there's an equal society and, you know, there's equity there? No, it isn't. And I think you're right, is that we have to reduce friction in the sense of this should be things we do for everybody to make sure they're not excluded from society. I don't know what other people think around the challenges we've got. You know, I'm seeing on chat and people going, you know, I'm homeschooling because my child can't cope with school, or I can't get into the workplaces because you know, every time I try, I'm getting really stressed over it and I have a poor experience, and then I don't get a job, and then I fall out of my job. And I think this is the challenge we've got, is how do we make it less, less frictionful, but to reduce the friction in society so it becomes something we think about everybody equitably. And we're in a funny place, aren't we, in the world at the moment, where we're going EDI in some countries now is like equity, diversity and inclusion is not being spoken about, when we were like, yeah, and suddenly it's not being spoken about. What do we need to do to move the dial on, really, you know, at an individual level, but I think at a societal level? How do we do that? Big questions. Yeah, Ben, you finger up. So that's a hand, but I'm going to take it, okay?
Jeffrey Craig in the chat, I think, has nailed it. Go universal design.
I think so. Yeah.
I think a really big danger is the them versus us.
Yeah.
And this, you know, neurodivergent versus neurotypical, and that being a war, when actually, you know, it's not all rosy for neurotypicals either, right? I think let's sort of maybe call a spade, and it's like life's hard, and there are loads of challenges, and there's loads of swirl, and there's lots of change, and we're exposed more now than ever to what is going on all over the world. And that is incredibly overwhelming because it's a massive world. And we've never had day-to-day, minute-by-minute updates on what is going on in various parts of the world, right? And that's from the weather to politics, wars, etc. That's a hell of a lot of information for people to try and sort of hold in their brains. And so, yeah, I am an optimist, but I do believe that this community is not going to give up. And so all of the right things are going to happen. It's just a case of when, and it's a case of priorities from a government and an institution perspective of how prioritized are these things, which is why things like Neurodiversity Celebration Week are so important, because we do have to keep raising our hand, and we do have to keep reminding that that we're here, and that there are significant and serious challenges that actually need solving at a ground level, as well as a, you know, government legislation, etc. level.
And I think a few people have put universal design in the chat, and I think it's important just to sort of say what that is. It came from universal design for education, came from how do we make things inclusive in their design, rather than the get-go, rather than responding to one-on-one. And I think you're right that we need, at a systemic level, at a political level, we need to have inclusive practice. So it's the way we do things for all. But I do think people make change, like you say. You know, there's a couple of thousand people on this, you know, call this morning. If you tell 5 people who tell 5 people who tell 5 people, I think we can have an impact in that way. Sometimes we can do small things that have a big impact as well. I am a you know, pragmatist, but I'm also positive. Still, we can make change. Sonny, you had your hand up. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, like obviously, just like, I think this is where, you know, change within society and within everything, and like whether universal design works and whether we get support and like how we do that, I do think, you know, it does come down to, you know, shifting our attitudes, because people aren't going to change things or support us or accommodate us if they see our needs or differences as a burden, if they see our needs and differences as something to be fixed, or if they believe that there's a right way to function, and so therefore they think we should fit the mold. And so a lot of it also comes down to shifting people's attitudes. shifting people's expectations and ideals when it comes to how like our existence and how we function. And obviously, like not just for neurodivergent people, like neurotypical people function differently too. They have differences too. They learn differently. They pay attention differently. They like, and so that's why I think it's actually really important that we shift our understanding of neurodiversity from, instead of a list of diagnoses, we focus on human differences. Because by doing this, one, we can make room for multiple narratives surrounding our neurodivergence, and because it is way more beneficial to identify and understand someone's unique profile of differences and needs, rather than be like, oh, okay, you have this list of diagnoses. That's not going to tell you much.
It doesn't tell you about who you are as a whole, does it? I think
yeah, exactly. And as well, when we focus on a diagnosis, it doesn't actually allow. So, for example, I hear voices. I don't meet the criteria for schizophrenia. I don't meet the criteria for psychosis, but I still hear voices. But if we were going to go by understanding my needs and differences through a list of diagnoses, we're going to ignore the fact that I hear voices because it's not under a list of diagnoses.
You're not bad enough. You don't fit that box. Yeah.
And so that's why I think, it's really important we understand neurodiversity through, traits and differences rather than the list of diagnoses, because then we can actually better, and as well, scattered as well, there are Indigenous communities who don't prescribe to diagnoses, where certain diagnoses don't accurately describe or fit their narratives or experiences. So we're already excluding people whose differences and needs don't fit under, the pathology paradigm, psychiatry's way of describing our differences. So I think, neurodiversity should be described as a list of differences.
And strengths. And I think one of the things we're here this morning, I'll come to you, Will, and then we're going to wrap up. I can't believe the time's gone so quickly. But one of the things globally, culturally, we use different words, we use different language, and we have different meaning. We socially engage in different ways. You shake a hand, you kiss somebody on one cheek, two cheeks, three cheeks, no cheeks, do you know what I mean? There's so many variations on how we communicate. And communication is the core of this, isn't it? We're none of us are a list of letters after our name. We're far more nuanced than that. But we have in the past put us in boxes. You're this, and even the neurotypical, neurodivergent, neurodiversity. I like the neurodiversity paradigm because it allows that conversation to say, who are you? Tell me about you. Tell me what are the things that you love doing. Tell me about your challenges. And it also allows us to change across our lifespan. We're not the same. Well, the day we were born to, at my age and whatever, I'm very different to who I was 20, 30, 40 years ago. So thank you for that. Will, did you want to just come in then? Then I think we're nearly going to wrap up.
I know, it's terrible. We're running out. So there was just so much in what Ben said, Carrie said, and Sonny said. I was trying to pull it together. I think there's three things for me. One is top-down change, I think, is really important. So that kind of government level, policy level, workplace levels, because Carrie's absolutely spot on. It's so complex, kind of work environments, and how do you accommodate for people? So that's really important leadership from governor. And I think also what you said, bottom up, in terms of everybody talking about it more in a positive frame, like all minds matter. Kind of neurodiversity is such a positive thing, so rich for our culture, our environment, for our intellectual thinking. I mean, from Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, Richard Branson, Ray Powell's world-leading leukemia expert, who's all kind of neurodivergent. And so those are the kind of positive messages that needs to be put across. And I love Ben's point about we're not going anywhere. One of the traits of neurodiversity is resilience. So, we will continue pushing and continue making changes. And it's just, that's what from my view, we need to do.
Thank you for that. And I think we've got to make sure that we have the people who don't have a voice that are included, because I think it's very easy for us to create a narrative that then even excludes many people in society that can't get through the door, don't know they are at the door, don't even know there is a door, and I think we need to keep reminding ourselves of the value of thinking about why somebody can't, show their talents and skills off in society. What's stopping them do so? And I think as having been critical of that is continuously important. And, I hope to be an irritant to my old age in the sense of, because I think we've got to put those questions. And across the week this week, we've got panels covering so much in different in criminal justice, employment, parents, educators, employers from all parts of society. But I want us to make sure that we do have those conversations in places and spaces where everybody can talk and speak. Last things, anybody want to shout out or say anything before we wrap up for this first panel, which I can't believe is over so quickly.
Like, too quick.
Sonny, did you want to jump in?
Very quickly, because I know there's comments in the chat. I just
Loads.
want to say that neurodivergent isn't anti-ethical to neurodiversity. Neurodivergent is just merely acknowledging someone that diverges from neuronormativity, the ideology that there's a right way to function. And I think
contextually varies as well across society.
And I think as long as there is an axis of power, as long as there is an oppressive system that pathologizes our differences, neurodivergent will remain relevant, just to name the social position of people who are marginalized by society. And so I think, you know, for many of us, neurodivergent is an important identity because it is acknowledging that, hey, this is what's happening to us. This
reminds us. It reminds us. Yeah.
And I think that's just really important to acknowledge. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that we can't, I think that's a great ending to a session. And look, I appreciate each one of you talking personally about your experiences around and being vulnerable as well, because I think we have a important role to stand up even when we feel we should be sitting down or actually hiding behind a screen rather than turning the cameras on. And I appreciate you coming and talking this morning. Thank you to everybody who's been. We've got 27,000 questions. We should have a 8-hour question-a-thon. I think that's what we need to think about next year, where we just keep having the dialogue open for even longer over a period of time. Thank you to each one of you this morning that's come from across the globe. And look, there are panels across the week. Sign up, join in. They're all free and they're amazing opportunities for conversation. So I appreciate. Thank you, everybody. Sonny, Ben, Cara, Will, thank you so much for coming along this morning. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you so much for hosting
Everyone.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining today's event. Thank you to all of our panelists and everyone who's attended. Just a couple of final notes from me. You can find all the sessions from this year's Neurodiversity Celebration Week on our website. I put it into the chat, but I've also got it up here. Please remember to engage with us on social media, share your stories and amplify the message, and keep an eye out for the post-event email, which should be sent to everyone who signed up to the event. Once again, huge thank you to all of our wonderful panelists, our moderators, and to you, our fantastic audience, for making Neurodiversity Celebration Week such an amazing success. Have a great week, everyone. Hope to see you at some other events, and goodbye.